Lucas Bennett seemed to have it all: a booming tech empire in Silicon Valley, the love of his life by his side, and the joy of holding his newborn son. But behind the sleek glass walls of his San Francisco penthouse, shadows were closing in. One day, everything vanished. His wife, Sophie, and their baby boy disappeared, and with them, his reason to breathe. For 6 long years, Lucas buried his heartbreak beneath billions, until fate dragged him into a dark alley in Oakland, where a boy's cry shattered his world again. A scar, a name, a memory. Could this be his son? And if so, what happened to Sophie? Stay with us. This story twists through betrayal, love, and revenge, ending in a truth that will break your heart and heal it in the same breath. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after the credits roll. Lucas Bennett stood silently at the edge of the smoldering wreckage, the smell of smoke still clinging to his black suit. The only thing colder than the ash-covered ruins of his childhood home was the hollow silence in his chest. His mother, his last living parent, had been inside when the fire erupted. The official report said it was faulty wiring, but Lucas's gut told him otherwise. The blaze had moved too fast, too precise. It felt intentional. He clenched his fists in the morning fog of San Francisco's Pacific Heights, his breath shallow against the grief pressing into his ribs like iron weights. The Bennett name carried power: tech empires, lobbying clout, innovation patents, but all of that meant nothing now. His mother was gone, and with her, the last tether to who he used to be. That night, Lucas returned to his penthouse atop the Transbay Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city, but the view brought no comfort. He stood alone in the vast living room, the silence broken only by the low hum of machinery and the rhythmic flicker of a digital fireplace he hadn't turned off in days. He was a man imprisoned by achievement, haunted by everything he had failed to protect. Then came the knock. Soft, unexpected, almost out of place in a home built to shield him from the world. He opened the door to a woman whose presence immediately shifted the energy of the room. She had ink-black hair twisted into a loose braid, her hazel eyes sharp with curiosity yet softened by something deeply human. She wore jeans and a navy blazer, and held a notepad pressed against her chest. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice calm but assertive. "I'm Sophie Rivera. I believe your mother's death wasn't an accident." Lucas's hand tightened around the doorframe. "Excuse me." "I'm a journalist, independent. I've been investigating suspicious property fires linked to high-value tech estates. Your mother's was the third in 6 months." Lucas studied her carefully, his instinct to shut the door warring with the flicker of hope she'd just reignited. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think someone wants you to believe it was just bad wiring, and I don't think you're the type to sit with a lie once you know it's there." She wasn't wrong. Reluctantly, he let her in. Sophie didn't walk like a stranger. She moved with quiet intention, respectful of his space but not intimidated by it. She placed a small stack of documents on the kitchen counter, photos of other fire scenes, building permits, falsified reports. All connected by a silent trail of cash leading to a name he already knew too well: Victor Crane, his business partner and longtime family friend. Lucas looked up sharply. "Why would Victor target my mother?" "That's what I'm trying to find out," Sophie replied. "But your company's been bidding on land those other properties used to sit on. Strategic tech locations, quiet transactions, all approved after the owners conveniently disappeared." The idea tasted like poison. Lucas exhaled slowly. "If what you're saying is true, I need more than speculation. I need evidence." Sophie nodded. "Then let me help you get it." He should have said no, should have told her to leave and buried himself in silence again, but something about her, the unflinching honesty in her voice, the urgency in her eyes, broke through his defenses. "All right," he said. "We work together, but I want everything. No filters." Sophie gave a soft, knowing smile. No filters. Over the next few weeks, they met in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, comparing records, tracing wire transfers, compiling timelines. Lucas was sharper than she expected, driven not just by revenge, but by a buried need for truth. Sophie, too, was surprised by how much she felt around him. He wasn't the arrogant tech mogul she expected. He was scarred, thoughtful, lonely. One night, after hours of combing through transaction logs, Sophie looked up from her laptop. "You loved her a lot, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Lucas didn't look up. "She was the only person who ever saw past all of this," he said, gesturing vaguely around the penthouse. "She saw the boy who used to fix broken radios in his bedroom, not the man who signs off on $10 million deals." Sophie said nothing, just placed a gentle hand on his. That simple gesture cracked something open. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He just sat on the balcony, the city below glowing in a blanket of fog. Sophie eventually joined him, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea from one of his mother's old mugs. Neither spoke for a long time. But something unspoken had shifted. Amidst grief and betrayal, a new spark had lit. Something tender, something real. And neither of them was ready for how much it would cost them. Lucas never expected his life to be split into two eras, before Sophie Rivera and after. A year had passed since the night she knocked on his door, armed with questions and courage. In the time since, her presence had become something Lucas depended on more than oxygen. They had uncovered layers of truth together, exposing smaller corruption trails that had somehow survived the fire of Victor Crane's greed. But somewhere between spreadsheets and subpoenas, between late-night laughter and quiet breakfasts, love had crept in, silent, undeniable, and deeply needed. They didn't announce their relationship. They didn't have to. When Lucas finally brought Sophie to his mother's grave one quiet morning, it felt like the only introduction that ever mattered. "I think she would have liked you," Lucas whispered, his fingers brushing Sophie's as they stood beneath the old oak that shaded the tombstone. Sophie smiled through tears. "I like to think she helped guide me to your door." Soon after, they married in a private ceremony. Just the two of them and a sleepy-eyed officiant in Sausalito who offered warm congratulations and a shaky Polaroid that Sophie framed and kept by the bed. 6 months later, their son, Noah, was born in the same hospital where Lucas had once been diagnosed with pneumonia as a boy. He never cried so hard, not even when he lost his mother. When he first held Noah, tiny fists curled at his chest, Lucas felt something in him crack and rebuild all at once. Here was a new beginning, a life untouched by betrayal, by loss, by the past, a child born into possibility. Noah had his mother's eyes and Lucas's smirk. As he grew, he filled their home with joyful chaos. Blocks scattered across marble floors, finger paint masterpieces stuck to the refrigerator, and the rhythmic thump of tiny feet racing down hallways that once echoed with silence. Sophie, ever the quiet storm, balanced motherhood with her investigative work. She wrote less often, but when she did, it made waves. A piece she published about corporate land seizures led to a state-level investigation. She turned down interviews, content to do the work while Lucas handled the spotlight. He had stepped back from daily operations at Bennett Systems, promoting his longtime COO and friend, Isaac Chen, to CEO. Lucas stayed on as chairman, but his real focus had become Noah's morning pancakes and Sophie's soft smiles in candlelit kitchens. Their life was not perfect, but it was real. Still, in the corners of their peace, shadows moved. Victor Crane hadn't been eliminated, just slowed. Lucas hadn't confronted him directly yet. He was waiting, watching, letting Victor believe he'd won something. The truth was, Victor had grown more reckless. His connections in private defense contracts, shady foreign acquisitions, and shell companies were building a paper trail Lucas would one day set ablaze. But for now, the battle could wait. On Noah's third birthday, Sophie baked a lopsided dinosaur cake with green icing that dyed everyone's teeth. Lucas, on a whim, gave Noah a wooden compass, a family heirloom passed from his grandfather. He knelt, his voice soft. "So, you can always find your way home." Noah clutched it with the reverence only a child could have. That night, as Lucas and Sophie stood at the window watching fireworks explode over the bay, she whispered, "We built this out of ashes, didn't we?" Lucas nodded, his voice low. "We did, and every day it feels more real." They didn't know that this moment, this fragile slice of calm, would be the last time their world would feel truly safe. The storm was already gathering. Victor Crane had grown tired of subtle sabotage, tired of Lucas surviving every blow, and he had found a way to strike deeper. But for now, in that quiet moment, under the orange flare of the city fireworks and the steady heartbeat of a sleeping child just down the hall, Lucas and Sophie allowed themselves to believe in forever. The morning began like any other. Sunlight crept through the linen curtains of the Bennett family's Bay Area home, casting gold across the kitchen tiles. Sophie hummed softly as she cut strawberries for Noah's breakfast. Lucas sat at the counter in a t-shirt and joggers, scrolling through emails while sipping his first coffee. Noah giggled from the living room, carefully building a block tower taller than himself. Nothing felt unusual, nothing felt wrong. And maybe that's what made it so cruel. By the time Lucas returned from a brief meeting in Palo Alto, the house was silent. Noah's tower was untouched. Sophie's phone lay charging on the counter. Her purse was still hanging by the door, but they were gone. No note, no text, no goodbye. Panic rose in Lucas's chest like a tidal wave. He called Sophie's phone. It rang in place. He called every friend, every neighbor, every contact she had. Nothing. He tore through the house looking for a clue, some explanation. That's when he found the envelope tucked inside the nightstand drawer. In Sophie's handwriting, "Don't look for me." 7 words, 7 blades. Lucas sat on the edge of their bed, clutching the letter with trembling hands. His mind raced. He refused to believe she'd just left, not without Noah's blanket, not without that old compass she always kept in her tote. The pain twisted into something darker, doubt. Hours later, Victor Crane showed up unannounced at the estate. "Lucas," he said with rehearsed sympathy, "I didn't want to believe it either, but she sold us out. Sophie accessed confidential prototypes from your cloud server last week. We traced the breach to her laptop." Lucas stared at him in disbelief. Victor continued, "I think she was planning this for a while. There's talk she's taken Noah and gone off the grid. Maybe she cut a deal." Lucas's knuckles whitened around the edge of the table. "No, Sophie would never—" "Wouldn't she?" Victor said smoothly. "You've known her how long, Lucas? People lie. People have agendas. We just don't always see it." It felt like being punched with velvet gloves. And as much as Lucas wanted to call it what it was, a lie, some small, poisonous seed of doubt had been planted. He checked the cloud logs himself. The data breach was real. Sophie's laptop had pinged their servers the night before her disappearance. But the files accessed? Nothing sensitive. Just old project notes, research papers, some of Lucas's own writings on tech ethics. Not proprietary, not stolen. Still, the damage was done. Whispers spread in boardrooms and across investor calls. Lucas Bennett's wife vanished after a suspected betrayal. Is the empire safe? Has the company lost its visionary edge? Lucas shut it all down. He refused to file a police report. He refused to alert the media. He refused to go searching, at least in any way that would make headlines. Because deep down, behind all the grief and confusion, he still loved her. If she had left, he wanted to believe it was for a reason. If someone had taken her, he feared learning the truth would break him. And so, life changed. The silence in the house became suffocating. The nursery door remained closed. The hallway photos of Noah stayed on the walls, but Lucas couldn't bear to look at them. He stopped hosting guests, stopped going out, stopped smiling. He clung to one thing, the necklace Sophie had given him on their first anniversary, a steel pendant engraved with their wedding date. He wore it beneath his shirt like armor. Victor, meanwhile, grew bolder. He, graciously, offered to run public relations for Bennett Systems during the family crisis. Lucas, too tired to fight, allowed it. Soon, Victor's name began appearing on more memos, more press releases, more documents of control. But Lucas wasn't blind. He was grieving, not stupid. He kept silent, observing, storing things away, waiting for answers. Because while the world assumed Lucas Bennett had been brought to his knees by a woman's betrayal, he was already quietly planning for the day he would uncover the truth. And, when he did, the reckoning would be more devastating than anyone could predict. The years that followed felt like living inside a paused frame of a once vivid film. Lucas Bennett, once the brightest voice of innovation in Silicon Valley, retreated from the limelight. The man who had once graced Forbes covers, who built tech that touched billions, now lived quietly in his glass penthouse high above the city, haunted by the hollow ache of what he had lost. 6 birthdays passed without a single candle blown. He never shut down the nursery, but he never walked in either. Every morning, he stepped over the same loose corner of the hallway rug where Noah had once tripped, giggling. Every night, he fell asleep beneath the same skylight Sophie had loved, watching the moon drift overhead like a silent witness to his failure. He still wore his wedding band. Not for show, not out of denial, but because he didn't know how to take it off without feeling like something inside him would cave. His days were clinical, structured like lines of code, designed for functionality, not joy. Meetings, prototypes, product launches, repeat. But the spark was gone. His board noticed. Investors whispered. Victor, of course, capitalized on it. With Lucas emotionally absent, Victor gradually shifted power within the company. He made strategic pivots in product lines, opened new partnerships Lucas would have never approved, tightened his control like a boa constrictor with velvet fangs. Still, Lucas said nothing. Because he was watching. Because he was waiting. And because he had nothing else left to lose. Late at night, when the house was silent and the hum of servers echoed through the penthouse, Lucas would take out Sophie's old bracelet from a locked drawer. It was simple, beaded, handmade, one of the first gifts she gave him when they were still just friends. She'd laughed and said, "It's not about the price. It's about the time it took to thread every piece." Lucas kept it in his palm like a compass. When the world felt too cold, too loud, too unfamiliar, he'd close his fingers around it and remember. Not the betrayal, not the disappearance, but the love. The night they sat under the redwoods and named constellations. The way she whispered, "I'm pregnant," like it was both a confession and a blessing. The morning he held Noah for the first time and cried into her shoulder from a place of joy so raw it startled him, that Lucas, young, fearless, wide open, was gone. But his memory stayed. The only contact Lucas had with the outside world, beyond work, was his private security team. One of them, an older ex-detective named Harris, sometimes brought updates unprompted. "We looked into a few shelters upstate. No hits," he said once, quietly sliding a file across Lucas's desk. "We checked the hospital logs. Still nothing under her name." Lucas didn't even flinch. He had stopped expecting breakthroughs. All he had now was time and regret. One night, 6 years and 2 days after Sophie vanished, Lucas sat at his dining room table, alone of course, reviewing R&D reports, when he noticed something strange on a background TV broadcast. A local segment was covering community outreach in Oakland. In the corner of the frame, behind a reporter speaking about food insecurity, stood a child with windswept hair, helping an elderly man carry a box. The boy turned. For only a moment, but Lucas froze. There, framed in that blink of a second, was a face that unraveled him. He hit pause. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, but his profile was unmistakable. That jawline, those deep-set, thoughtful eyes, the posture that mirrored his own childhood photo so clearly it knocked the wind from his lungs. And then, something else. On the boy's wrist, barely visible beneath the fraying sleeve of a jacket, was a silicone band with a faded name tag. Lucas zoomed in. His hands trembled. Noah. He didn't sleep that night, didn't finish the report, didn't drink the whiskey sitting beside him. He simply stared at the screen, paused on that boy's face. And for the first time in years, Lucas Bennett allowed something other than grief to take root. Hope. Not reckless, not naive, but defiant. Because if that was Noah, then Sophie had been telling the truth all along. And someone, somewhere, had wanted Lucas to believe she was a liar. It started with a still frame, a flicker of a moment. But for Lucas Bennett, it was enough to reignite something that had long since gone dark. The next morning, he canceled all his meetings without explanation. His assistant blinked as he walked past her desk, keys already in hand, expression unreadable. "I'll be out," was all he said. 2 hours later, he was driving through the graying neighborhoods of East Oakland, a part of the city his Tesla had never ventured into. Gone were the clean lines of Soma, the glass towers of tech empires. Here, the streets were cracked, the air smelled faintly of burnt oil and rain, and the world moved a little slower, heavier. Lucas didn't know what he was looking for. But something inside him, something old, quiet, instinctive, did. He parked near a corner bodega where the community broadcast had been filmed. Stepping out, he scanned the sidewalk. A woman swept her porch. A boy pushed a shopping cart full of recyclables. A couple of teenage girls leaned against a shuttered laundromat, eyes tracking him with a blend of curiosity and suspicion. And then he saw him, the boy from the news segment. Same tangled dark hair, same quiet posture, same silicone wristband. Lucas's breath caught. He stepped forward, slowly, almost reverently. The boy was crouched beside a folding table lined with mismatched items, action figures, used books, plastic kitchenware. He was organizing them with care, gently repositioning a chipped toy car, brushing dust off a teddy bear with a threadbare ear. Lucas stopped a few feet away. "Hey," he said softly. The boy looked up. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Lucas swallowed. Are you Noah?" The boy nodded, cautious but not afraid. "Yeah." "Do I know you?" Lucas smiled tightly, his heart clenching at the sound of that voice. "No, but I think I might have known your mom." At the word mom, Noah's expression changed. Not panic, but something guarded, like a memory trying not to be touched. "She's gone," he said plainly. "She died 3 years ago. Food poisoning, they said." Lucas blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness. "I'm so sorry," the boy nodded again, like he'd said it enough times that the sting had dulled. Lucas knelt down, his suit brushing against the damp concrete. "And now, you're selling these?" "To help Miss Rachel. She lets us sleep in the shelter at night. But we gotta earn our stay. I help with stuff. I'm good at it." "I bet you are," Lucas whispered. "You're very brave." Noah tilted his head, studying him. "You look like someone." Lucas's throat tightened. "Maybe someone your mom once knew." He glanced down at the table. Amid the clutter, his eyes landed on a small, cracked frame, a photo of Sophie holding a newborn, her smile radiant even in the grainy ink of a faded print. He picked it up with trembling hands. "I took that from her box," Noah said quietly. "She never let go of it." Lucas set it down, careful not to let his fingers shake. "Would it be okay," he asked gently, "if we got something to eat?" Noah looked unsure. "I can't leave without permission." "Of course," Lucas said, rising. "Maybe we can get permission together." Minutes later, they stood in front of a narrow brick building with peeling blue paint and the faded sign, "Safe Haven Shelter for Families." Inside, a thin, wiry woman with tired eyes and a clipboard approached. "Rachel Morrison," she said, extending a hand. "You must be the one who helped Noah earlier." Lucas nodded, his voice low. "I'd like to take him out for a bite, nothing fancy. Just a burger and a milkshake. He deserves that much." She studied him carefully. "You're not press?" "No." "A distant relative?" "Closer than you think," he replied softly. She nodded once. "Be back before dusk." They sat in a booth at a retro diner off 14th Street, the kind with cracked vinyl seats and faded ketchup bottles. Noah ordered a cheeseburger and chocolate milkshake. Lucas got the same. Between bites, the boy talked. About his chores at the shelter, his love of science, the books his mom used to read to him, especially The Little Prince, how he'd memorized whole pages just by listening. Lucas listened, enthralled. Every word from the boy's mouth was a thread tying him tighter to a past he'd thought lost forever. Then Noah said something that made Lucas's heart break wide open. "I still talk to her sometimes," the boy whispered, licking chocolate from his fingers. "At night, I tell her about the stars. I think she hears me." Lucas blinked away tears, gripping his coffee cup so tightly it threatened to crack. He wanted to say, "I hear you too," but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out something he'd carried for years, a photo of Sophie holding Noah in the hospital seconds after his birth. He slid it across the table. Noah's eyes widened. "That's me?" he said. "Yes," Lucas replied, voice trembling. "Yes, it is." That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. Noah's face haunted him. Not just the resemblance, not just the voice that echoed so much of Sophie's, but something more intimate, more undeniable. A child didn't need a DNA test when truth was written across his laugh lines, etched in the slope of his brow, wrapped up in the soft tilt of his head as he smiled. Still, Lucas needed something, anything, to anchor his hope. And he found it by accident. While walking Noah back to the shelter, the boy had tripped on the uneven curb and landed hard on his palms. Lucas reached out instinctively, steadying him, and that's when he saw it. A thin, faded scar curving along the boy's inner forearm, like a comma paused mid-sentence. Lucas froze. His breath caught. Sophie had called it the story mark. Noah had been born early, tubes and needles and too much fear in a room meant for joy. She used to run her fingers along that scar when she rocked him to sleep, whispering that he was strong because he was made of both miracles and fire. Lucas remembered, because he had been there. The scar was the same, exactly the same. Back in the car, Lucas sat in silence for several long minutes before pulling away from the shelter. He didn't drive home. Instead, he found himself parked outside a 24-hour cafe, the lights inside glowing faintly against the darkened glass. The rain started then, soft, steady, cleansing. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name. Ethan Samuels. A former FBI agent, now a private investigator, one of the few people Lucas trusted completely. He hit dial. "Lucas?" Ethan's voice was groggy. "It's 1 a.m. I found him." "Who?" "My son." There was a pause, then the rustle of bed sheets, followed by the scrape of a lamp switch. "Where?" "Oakland. Shelter called Safe Haven. He's 6, maybe 7. His name's Noah. His mother was Sophie." Another pause, this one longer. "Lucas, Sophie's dead." "I know," Lucas replied quietly, "but I don't know why, or how, and I need answers." Ethan's voice changed, sharpened. "You think it wasn't an accident?" "I think someone wanted her gone, and I think it's someone who's been close to me all along." There was no need to say Victor's name. "I'll take the next flight out," Ethan said. By morning, Lucas had coffee in hand and 3 different background check reports spread across his kitchen island. Rachel, the shelter manager, had confirmed Sophie's real last name had been Rivera, and that she'd used it consistently after moving into the shelter system. There were no recent employment records, no criminal history, no legal complaints. Just silence. A woman who had all but disappeared from the grid 6 years ago. But Lucas knew better. Sophie hadn't disappeared. She'd been erased. When Ethan arrived later that afternoon, he brought with him a hard drive of archived police reports, a digital map, and a folder of surveillance footage from a gas station a few blocks away from where Sophie was last known to be seen. He also brought something else, hope that Lucas hadn't dared to carry on his own. "There's something off," Ethan said, pointing to a date-stamped incident. "This was the day Sophie was reported dead, but look at the timing." He flipped to the next page. The coroner logged her in at 9:03 a.m. The food truck where she supposedly ate didn't serve anything until after 10 o'clock. The timeline's broken. Lucas stared, stunned. So, either the food poisoning story is false, or someone made sure it became the official story. Ethan finished grimly. Lucas clenched his jaw. "Victor." Ethan nodded. "If he forged this, he didn't act alone. We'll need witnesses, people who knew her, someone who helped her in those final days." Lucas pulled out the photo he'd taken from Noah's table. Sophie's smile, the way she cradled Noah as if protecting him from the entire world. "He didn't just kill her," Lucas whispered. "He tried to erase every trace she left behind." "But he didn't erase Noah," Ethan said gently. Lucas looked up, and for the first time in years, fire returned to his eyes. "No," he said firmly, "and now I'm going to make sure no one erases him either." Later that evening, Lucas returned to the shelter. He had permission to bring Noah ice cream. As they sat on the curb, spoons clinking against styrofoam cups, Noah looked up at him. "Are you going to come back tomorrow?" the boy asked. Lucas hesitated. Then, with a warm, genuine smile, he said, "Yes, Noah, I will. And the day after that, and the day after that, too." The boy grinned. "Cool." Lucas chuckled softly, his heart tight. In that one word, cool, was all the quiet trust of a child who didn't know he had a father sitting beside him. But one day soon, he would. And Lucas would be ready. The next day dawned overcast, casting a gray veil over San Francisco's skyline. Lucas stood in his home office, staring at the city below, hands buried in his pockets as Ethan scanned through Sophie's last known locations on a digital map. The silence between them was heavy, charged with purpose. Ethan looked up. "There's a woman. Name's Maggie Alvarez. Worked housekeeping at your estate until 6 years ago. Lucas blinked. Maggie? She left right after Sophie vanished. Moved across the bay, took a job cleaning offices in Fremont. Guess who fired her? Lucas didn't need to guess. Victor. Ethan nodded. He told her there'd be consequences if she talked to anyone, but I tracked her down. She's scared, but she agreed to meet. Today. In an hour. Lucas grabbed his coat, his voice quiet but resolute. Let's go. They met in a quiet diner just outside Fremont. Maggie Alvarez was older now, her hands worn and voice hushed, but her eyes still sharp, haunted, like someone who'd been carrying a secret too long. She sat stiffly across from Lucas and Ethan, glancing nervously over her shoulder before speaking. I didn't know what happened to Sophie until months later, she whispered, fingers tightening around her coffee mug. All Victor told me was that she was gone, that she'd betrayed the company, and if I ever asked questions, I'd be next. Lucas leaned in gently. Maggie, I need the truth. Maggie looked at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled shakily. Sophie was scared, Lucas. The night before she left, she told me she'd overheard Victor talking on the phone. Something about shell companies, offshore accounts, data leaks. She had a file. She said if anything happened to her, that file would explain everything. Lucas's chest tightened. Did she give it to you? No, but she said she hid it, somewhere safe. Maggie paused, her brow furrowing. She wore that silver locket every day, you remember? After she left, I found it in the trash in the laundry room. It was empty, like someone had pried it open. I kept it, just in case. She reached into her purse and placed the locket on the table. Lucas picked it up slowly. The clasp was damaged, but inside, beneath the lining, was a thin piece of paper, folded so small it was nearly invisible. Ethan unfolded it. It wasn't the full file, but it was a start. Coordinates, timestamps, a reference to a secure drive at a P.O. box in Oakland. Maggie whispered. She tried to protect him, your son, and you. Lucas swallowed hard, the locket now feeling heavy in his palm. She died because she was trying to protect the truth, Ethan said quietly. No, Lucas said, voice cold and steady. She died because I trusted the wrong man. That night, back at the shelter, Lucas asked if he could take Noah out for dinner again. Rachel agreed, on the condition they stayed local. Over burgers and milkshakes at a quiet spot down the block, Lucas watched Noah spoon whipped cream off his shake and hum to himself. A soft, innocent rhythm. Can I ask you something? Lucas said, trying to keep his voice light. Okay. Do you remember anything about your mom that made her smile? Like, really smile? Noah tilted his head thoughtfully. She liked music, and flowers. She used to hum when she watered plants. Even when we didn't have any flowers, she'd pretend we did. Lucas smiled sadly. She pretended a lot, huh? Yeah, Noah said, nodding. She said pretending made real things come faster. Lucas's chest ached. He took a slow breath. And what about you? He asked. Is there something you wish was real? Noah paused, then looked up with startling honesty. I wish I had a dad. Lucas froze. Noah looked back down at his fries, muttering softly, but I know wishes are for kids who have someone to believe them. Lucas leaned forward, his voice breaking. Noah, I believe you. The boy looked up, wide-eyed. Lucas blinked hard. And I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? Noah nodded slowly. A soft smile formed on his face. Cool. That night, as Lucas tucked Noah into a bunk bed at the shelter, Rachel watched from the hallway. She'd never seen Noah smile that way, not since Sophie. You look tired, she said gently as Lucas stepped out. I feel 100 years old. he said with a weary chuckle. Rachel paused. I don't know who you are to that boy, but I know you matter. He was drawing pictures of you today, called you his guardian dude. Lucas laughed under his breath. Then he turned to her, more serious. I need your help. If I go after the man who did this, if something happens to me, he needs someone who won't lie to him. Rachel didn't hesitate. I'll protect him, but promise me something too. Anything. If you come back whole. Lucas nodded slowly, and as he walked out into the foggy San Francisco night, the locket in his pocket and a fire in his chest, he whispered to himself, Will. The old post office in Oakland looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Its beige walls were stained by time, the metal mailboxes worn at the corners. Lucas stood inside the dim lobby, the paper from Sophie's locket clutched tightly in his hand. The number on the note, Box 132, was barely legible now, smudged by the oils of too many rereads. He approached the counter. The clerk, a tired-looking man with thick glasses and a wrinkled USPS shirt, didn't even look up. I'm here to access a box, Lucas said calmly, sliding his ID and the paper across the counter. The man glanced at both, then hesitated. This one's flagged. Lucas tensed. Flagged? How? The clerk leaned in slightly. Someone tried to access it last year, said they had clearance from the family. We didn't buy it. Since then, protocol requires verification of legal guardianship. Lucas nodded. I have power of attorney over the estate of Sophie Rivera. I can get you a copy in an hour. The clerk studied him, then relented. Bring it back. I'll keep the box held for you. Lucas thanked him and stepped outside into the haze of a late morning fog. Ethan was waiting by the car, pacing. Well, there's something in there, but someone else tried to get to it first. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Victor. Lucas didn't need to say it. They both knew. By that afternoon, Lucas had secured the paperwork. The post office clerk, now far more cooperative, unlocked box 1032 with a dull key and slid the contents across the counter in a yellowing manila envelope. Lucas opened it carefully. Inside were several flash drives, a crumpled receipt from a lab in Sunnyvale, and a single typed letter. He unfolded it, heart pounding. Lucas, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise, to tell you everything face to face. I'm sorry. I didn't run. I was forced out. Victor's not just stealing from your company. He's hiding things, dangerous things. I found records of child experimentation contracts disguised as medical grants. I knew if I told you, he'd try to discredit me. Or worse. Noah was never supposed to suffer because of this. I pray he never finds out what I saw, but if something happens to me, you need to protect him and expose Victor. Use what I found. I love you. I always did. Sophie, Lucas, stood frozen, his throat tight. Her voice, so fierce, so full of conviction, even on paper, made his hands tremble. Ethan looked over his shoulder, reading in silence. They used company funds to bankroll human testing, he murmured, pointing to the receipts. Under a shell corporation in Costa Rica. Sophie knew. She had evidence. And Victor, shut her up. Lucas felt the anger boiling beneath, his grief. She was trying to save lives, and he treated her like a liability. Ethan looked up. You ready to bring this into the light? Lucas nodded slowly. More than ever. That evening, Lucas called a confidential meeting with 3 board members he trusted, people who had known his father, people who once mentored him. In a secure boardroom inside the Adams Technologies building, he laid everything out. The lab receipts, the shell accounts, Sophie's letter. Ethan presented a forensic trail linking the illegal contracts back to Victor's authorization codes. The room was silent when Lucas finally spoke. I know this will cause damage, publicly, financially, but if we don't come clean, we're complicit. One of the older members, Janice Cho, folded her hands slowly. And if Victor retaliates? Lucas didn't flinch. Let him. Janice looked at the others, then back at Lucas. Then let's clean house. 2 days later, Lucas stood outside a news station with Ethan, USB drives in hand, waiting for his interview segment to air. A whistleblower press conference was set for the following week. Anonymous sources, protected identities, a national reckoning. But just as they were heading back to the car, Ethan's phone buzzed, and his face drained. "Rachel's number," he said, eyes wide. "But it's not her." Lucas grabbed the phone. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low, male, and shaking with smug cruelty. "She should have stayed quiet, Lucas. Just like Sophie." Lucas's blood ran cold. Then the line went dead. He was already running. Back at the shelter, the entrance was wide open. Inside, chaos. Rachel's purse on the ground, a shattered lamp, and a torn piece of Noah's backpack by the door. Lucas shouted her name as he rushed through the building. "Rachel! Noah!" No response. In the playroom, a note had been taped to the whiteboard. "If you want them back, stop the press. Or they disappear, just like she did." Lucas clenched the note, rage and terror flooding his chest. He turned to Ethan, breath catching. "Victor's making his final move." Ethan didn't hesitate. "So will we." Lucas gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The city lights of San Francisco blurred past, unregistered. Beside him, Ethan called every contact they had. FBI liaisons, private security, even off-the-record cops who owed him favors. But no one had seen Rachel or Noah. "Nothing," Ethan muttered, slamming the phone into the center console. Victor covered his tracks. Lucas's voice was low, dangerous. He didn't cover them well enough. He turned down a side street and pulled up to an unmarked building in South of Market. The windows were tinted, the entrance discreet. It was one of his lesser-known properties, a private tech safe house used to test unreleased surveillance gear. "Get the equipment up. I want facial recognition scouring every traffic feed within 50 miles. If his people moved Rachel and Noah, we'll catch it." Ethan looked at him, startled. "You really kept this place running?" Lucas's eyes never left the entrance. "I never stopped preparing for war." 2 hours later, they had their first hit. A grainy highway camera caught a black van matching the shelter's description heading northbound toward the marine headlands. No plates, no visible faces. But the van made a quick exit off Highway 101, onto a remote, service-only road that led into the old military tunnels near Hawk Hill. Ethan zoomed in on the timestamp. "That's 20 minutes before the ransom call." Lucas leaned closer to the screen, his jaw tight. "He's using the old Nike missile bunkers. You think Victor has the guts to hold a child hostage in a Cold War relic?" Lucas grabbed his jacket. "He's desperate, and he knows we're close. This is his last card." Fog blanketed the hill as Lucas and Ethan approached the rusted gate to the abandoned base. Chain-link fencing hung open, cut clean through. Their footsteps were muffled by the moss and debris scattered across the cracked asphalt. Ahead, a set of heavy steel doors stood slightly ajar, breathing stale air into the cold night. Lucas held his breath. "Stay close. No hero moves unless we're forced." Inside, the bunker's narrow corridors echoed with every step. It smelled of rust, mildew, and old betrayal. The flashlight beam danced along cement walls as they moved deeper. Then, faintly, Noah's voice. "Mom, please wake up." Lucas broke into a run. They found them in a locked maintenance room, Rachel unconscious, bound to a chair, her breathing shallow. Noah sat at her feet, arms around her legs, sobbing softly. "Dad?" Lucas froze. The word hit him harder than a bullet. "I'm here, Noah. I'm here," he whispered, rushing to them. He scooped Noah into his arms, holding him so tightly the boy squeaked. Ethan cut the ropes on Rachel. "She's alive. Pulse is weak, but steady." Lucas's voice cracked. "We need to move. Now." But just as they turned, a slow clap echoed behind them. "Well done," Victor Crane sneered, stepping out of the shadows with 2 armed men. "Found them." Lucas stepped forward, shielding Noah. "You're done, Victor. The evidence is out. The press conference is already underway." Victor smirked. "Is it? I thought you were too distracted to notice the broadcast never aired." Lucas didn't blink. "That was a decoy. The real files went live 15 minutes ago. Every journalist in the country has them." Victor's grin faltered. Ethan stepped beside Lucas. "And those men behind you? Their badges say FBI now." Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashlights beamed through the hallway. The 2 thugs dropped their weapons immediately. Victor backed up, panic finally breaking his composure. "You ruined everything." "No," Lucas interrupted coldly. "You did that the moment you decided Sophie's life was worth less than your profit." Agents stormed in and cuffed Victor. He didn't struggle. He just stared at Lucas with bitter contempt. "You think this makes you a hero?" Lucas looked at Noah, who clung to his leg. "No," he said quietly. "It makes me a father." At the hospital, Rachel lay in a private room with the sunlight seeping through drawn curtains. Lucas sat by her side, fingers gently resting on her hand. The doctor had confirmed the sedative Victor used wasn't lethal, but it would take time to flush out. Still, she stirred now and then, murmuring Noah's name in her sleep. Ethan entered quietly, handing Lucas a phone. "It's done. Victor was booked an hour ago. Corporate accounts frozen. He's facing federal charges." Lucas exhaled, relief and exhaustion weighing heavy on his chest. "I owe you everything, Ethan." Ethan smiled. "You owe me dinner." Lucas chuckled softly, then looked back at Rachel. "I just want her to wake up. And no, she didn't fight alone." "She never did," Ethan said gently. "You just didn't realize you were in the same war." That night, as the city breathed in the silence of dusk, Noah lay asleep on a couch in the hospital room. Lucas sat nearby, eyes heavy, when Rachel finally opened hers. Her lips moved slowly. "Lucas?" He rushed to her side. "Hey! Hey, I'm right here." She looked at Noah. "He's safe?" Lucas nodded, voice thick with emotion. "Because of you, because of what you did." She squeezed his hand weakly. "I knew you'd come." And for the first time in years, Lucas believed her. The next morning, golden sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, casting a warm glow over Rachel's face. Lucas sat beside her, cradling a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He wasn't drinking it, just holding on to something solid while the moment stayed fragile. Rachel stirred again, her eyes fluttering open fully this time. "You look terrible," she whispered, her voice hoarse but teasing. Lucas smiled softly. "Still better than you did last night." Her brow furrowed as flashes of memory returned. Victor, the van, Noah's frightened cries. She tried to sit up, but Lucas gently pressed her shoulder down. "Take it easy. You're safe now. It's over." "Noah?" "He's in the playroom with Ethan. He asked for waffles and cartoons. Said that's what brave boys get after scary nights." Rachel let out a laugh, then winced. "Ouch. Laughing hurts." Lucas reached for her hand. "I thought I'd lost you." "You almost did," she replied quietly. "But I never stopped believing you'd come." Across town, Victor Crane sat behind a reinforced glass partition at the Federal Detention Center. His orange jumpsuit looked foreign on him, like power removed and replaced with fluorescent shame. On the other side of the glass sat Ethan, flanked by Agent Maya DesRosiers from the FBI. They said nothing for a long moment. "You're wasting your time," Victor finally said, voice laced with arrogance. "There's no plea deal I'd take." Agent DesRosiers leaned forward. "This isn't about deals. We just want you to understand what's coming. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, kidnapping. You'll never see the outside of a boardroom again." Victor smirked. Neither will Lucas once this story breaks. Ethan chuckled, standing. You still don't get it, do you? The story already broke, and the world doesn't see Lucas as a fallen CEO. They see him as a father who fought for his son and the woman he loves. You? You're just another suit and cuffs. As they walked out, Victor called after them, voice trembling for the first time. You think people forget? Power always comes back. Ethan didn't turn around. Not yours. Back at the penthouse, Noah had turned the living room into a fort made of couch cushions, blankets, and an army of plush animals. Lucas ducked under the makeshift archway and found him buried in the middle with a flashlight and a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. Hey, Lucas said gently. Can I join your kingdom? Noah nodded solemnly. Only if you promise not to step on Mr. Hedgehog. Lucas smiled and lay down beside him. Deal. They lay there quietly for a moment, the hush comforting. Then Noah whispered, Are we going to live together now? Lucas's breath caught. Only if that's what you want. Noah didn't answer right. Away. He scooted closer and laid his head on Lucas's chest. I think I'd like that. Lucas blinked away tears. Me too, buddy. Me too. Rachel was discharged 3 days later. She refused a wheelchair despite the nurse's insistence and walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet. Lucas was waiting outside with Noah in his arms, the sunlight catching his dark hair and hers in perfect harmony. They returned to the penthouse, not as scattered pieces of a broken past, but as a family attempting to rebuild. Slowly, honestly. Rachel stood in the threshold of the master bedroom, taking in the skyline view, the pristine furniture, the cold perfection of the space. It's beautiful, she said, then looked at Lucas. But it doesn't feel like us. Lucas nodded. Then, let's make it ours. In the weeks that followed, Lucas restructured his company, stepping down as CEO and promoting Linda, a woman he trusted to lead with integrity. He moved operations into a more collaborative model and publicly acknowledged the crimes that had unfolded under Victor's watch. His press statement was brief but powerful. We can't change the past, but we can build companies and families that are accountable for it. Rachel started writing again, not just for journalism, but memoir pieces, advocacy blogs, stories that told the truth about what it meant to survive. Not as a victim, but as a voice. Noah thrived. He painted. He laughed more. He insisted on calling Lucas Dad now, no longer just when he was scared. And late one night, when the city was quiet and the stars barely peeked through San Francisco's fog, Lucas brought Rachel to the rooftop. He pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring, not yet, but a key. To the new place, he said. Not a fortress, not a tower, just a house, with a yard and squeaky floors and maybe a dog if you let me. Rachel looked at the key, then at him. You're really staying this time? Lucas didn't hesitate. I'm already home. The morning fog still lingered as Lucas stood by the window of his office at Bennett Tech, the skyline of San Francisco blurred through the glass. He clutched the manila envelope in his hands, a file thick with the weight of years stolen, lies spun, and a love lost too soon. Victor Crane, once his business partner, now sat smugly across the mahogany table, tapping his fingers, oblivious to the storm about to break. You wanted a meeting? Victor smirked, his confidence soaked in arrogance. You've been distant. Is it the boy again? You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment, Lucas. Lucas didn't respond at first. He walked over calmly and placed the file on the table with a deliberate thud. This, he said, his voice low but steady, is every piece of evidence tying you to Sophie's death. The poisoning, the cover-up, the threats to Maggie, the wire transfers to the hitman you hired. It's all here. Victor's grin faltered for a split second, then returned, forced, brittle. You're bluffing. Lucas didn't blink. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive. There's also video testimony, witnesses, including your driver from that night. FBI agents are waiting downstairs, Victor. The only thing you get to choose now is whether you walk out in cuffs or on a stretcher." For a moment, the room was frozen. The air was thick with years of betrayal, rage, and heartbreak. Then came the sound of chaos. Boots in the hallway, agents calling out Victor's name. He stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair. "You think this ends with me in jail?" Victor snarled, pointing a trembling finger. "You'll lose everything without me." Lucas didn't move. "I already lost the woman I loved. I almost lost my son. You have nothing left to take." The FBI agents burst through the door. "Victor Crane, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and attempted kidnapping." Victor lunged toward the file, desperate, pathetic, but Lucas stepped in front of him. "You lied to me," Lucas said, voice cracking. "You made me believe Sophie betrayed me when all along she died trying to protect the truth." Victor was shoved into cuffs, shouting incoherently, but no one listened anymore. As he was escorted out, Lucas sank into the chair. His hands trembled, but not from fear. It was release. It was grief. It was justice. Later that night, in the quiet of his penthouse, Lucas sat beside Noah, who was fast asleep under a soft blue blanket. The boy's face was peaceful now, no longer burdened by uncertainty or fear. Lucas reached into a drawer and pulled out Sophie's locket. Inside was a tiny picture of the three of them, faded but radiant. His thumb brushed the edge of it, eyes misting. "I did it, Sophie," he whispered brokenly. "He's gone. You can rest now." A tear slipped down his cheek, but it wasn't just sadness. It was gratitude. It was closure. Tomorrow, they would begin again. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of Lucas Bennett's penthouse, casting a soft golden hue over the newly arranged family room. Toys dotted the floor. A half-built Lego castle guarded the corner, and on the coffee table sat a framed photograph of Sophie Rivera, smiling, radiant, forever young. Lucas stood in the kitchen, whisking pancake batter in a mixing bowl, his hair tousled, his shirt wrinkled. He looked more alive than he had in years. Behind him, the sound of padded feet tiptoeing in brought a smile to his face. "Good morning, champ," he said without turning. Noah ran up and hugged his waist, burying his face in Lucas's side. "You're making pancakes?" the boy mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. "Only the best in the Bay Area," Lucas said with a wink. "Chocolate chip, just how you like them." It was their new rhythm, simple, grounded, sacred. Since the day Victor Crane was taken away in handcuffs, everything had shifted. Not just externally, but within. Noah now had a room of his own, painted sky blue, covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. He was enrolled in school just a few blocks away. Maggie, Sophie's former housekeeper and lifelong friend, had moved in as a grandmother figure and guardian when Lucas had to travel. And Lucas had stopped running. Legally, the adoption had gone through 2 weeks earlier. Standing in court, holding Noah's hand as the judge declared them a family, Lucas had felt something give way in his chest. Not pain, not guilt, but peace. Now, as he flipped the first pancake onto Noah's plate, Lucas looked out over the city and whispered, "She'd be proud of you." Noah looked up. "Do you think Mom can see us?" Lucas knelt beside him, his eyes soft and full. "I think she's been with us every step of the way. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every time you smiled and didn't even know why. You felt her, didn't you?" Noah nodded, lip trembling. "Sometimes I hear her voice when I'm scared. It tells me I'm okay." Lucas blinked quickly. "That's her, bud. She's always been your safe place. And now you're mine." They ate in comfortable silence, the weight of grief now a familiar companion, no longer crushing, just present, like a photograph framed on a shelf. That afternoon, Lucas stood outside a newly renovated red brick building in Oakland. A fresh banner hung above the door, the Sophie Rivera Foundation, for mothers and children in crisis. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small. Just a few close friends, some former colleagues of Sophie's from her journalism days, and several families already helped by the early pilot programs. Lucas stepped up to the microphone, clearing his throat. Noah stood beside him, clutching his hand. "This place," he began, his voice husky, "was born out of pain, out of the worst kind of loss. But today it stands for hope, for women like Sophie, for children like Noah, for every family that's ever been broken by injustice and still dared to heal." He glanced at Noah, then out to the crowd. "Sophie taught me that truth has a cost, that silence is easy, but love, real love, fights, and sometimes that fight builds something beautiful." The crowd applauded, but Lucas didn't hear it. He just looked up at the sky, as if searching for her. "Thank you," he whispered. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lucas tucked Noah into bed. He handed the boy the locket, Sophie's locket, now containing a photo of all three of them, freshly printed, tucked next to the old one. Noah held it like treasure. "Can I sleep with it?" "Of course," Lucas said, kissing his forehead. "She'd want you to." As Lucas turned off the light and stepped out, Noah's voice called softly after him. "Dad?" He stopped. That word still caught him every time. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you found me." Lucas smiled through the tears. "Me too, Noah. Me too." And, for the first time in a long time, Lucas closed the door to a room that wasn't empty, but full of laughter, love, and the echo of a promise kept.